Colonel Way to British Peace Conference Commission, Paris and Foreign Office, Warsaw, January 19, 1919. Number of Korean and Chinese units is reported to be increasing by persons arriving from Ukraine and Soviet Russia. Sole object of these units is plunder, as they are merely bandits and not a regular army. Gravity of situation created by this new development cannot be sufficiently emphasized. Mr. Alston to Earl Curzon, received January 25th. Sent January 23rd, 1919, from Vladivostok. Following from High Commissioner. Following statements respecting Bolsheviks in Perm and neighborhood are taken from reports sent by His Majesty's Council at Yekaterinburg. The Omsk government have similar information. The Bolsheviks can no longer be described as a political party holding extreme communistic view. They form a relatively small privileged class which is able to terrorize the rest of the population because it has a monopoly both of arms and of food supplies. The class consists chiefly of workmen and soldiers and included a large non-Russian element such as Lets and Estonians and Jews. The latter are especially numerous in higher posts. Members of this class are allowed complete license and commit crime against other sections of society. The army is well disciplined as most strict system especially is applied to it. It is generally said that officers are forced to serve because their families are detained hostages. The population of Perm was rationed, and non-Bolsheviks received only 1/4 pound of bread a day. The peasantry suffered less, but were forbidden under pain of death to sell food to any but Bolsheviks. The churches were closed, for many priests were killed, and a bishop was buried alive. This and other barbarous punishments, such as dipping people in rivers till they were frozen to death. Those condemned to be shot were let out several times and fired at with blank cartridges, never knowing when the real execution would take place. Many other atrocities have been reported. The Bolsheviks apparently were guilty of wholesale murder in Perm, and it is certain that they had begun to operate a plan of systematic extermination on a lamp above a building where the words, "Only those who fight shall eat." Lord Kilmarnock to Earl Curzon, received February 1st. Was sent January 21st, 1919, from Copenhagen. My Lord, have the honor to report that a reliable Danish engineer employed in the Ryabinsky factory near Moscow, who has traveled considerably in Russia lately and who left Petrograd on the 11th, instant reports that there is a growing tendency on the part of the central committees to disregard the local committees and to absorb all the power. Though the Bolshevik regime was more hated than ever, resistance from inside was less strong, and as nearly the whole population was suffering from starvation, the people were physically incapable of throwing off the yoke of the oppressors. My informant stated that recently, in connection with arranging a credit for his factory, he had to deal with the committees, and he was surprised to find how largely they were recruited from former officers, directors, factories, etc. And he said that every day there were fewer people who refused to serve the Red Guard. The hostility between the soldiers and the peasants was less acute as the stocks of the latter were now exhausted, and they no longer feared the arbitrary requisitions of the guards. Only the smaller peasants were admitted to the committees. The Chinese Guard in Petrograd numbered about 5,000 in discipline, and the Bolshevik army was severe than ever before, and executions as numerous. Peasants were being mobilized, but as they resisted, they were always distributed in several regiments, so that there should be no large focus of discontent in any particular regime. His own factory, which had been nationalized, was still working, and 6,000 workmen were employed. Though there were still a few Bolsheviks among them, the majority had gradually succeeded and had given up their beliefs in Bolshevism. As the factory owned a forest, they were still able to get fuel, and shoddy goods were turned out, which were handed over to the central. But my informant states that they were not sold, but were added to the stocks of goods collected by the central. His factory was one of the few that were still working, as, owing to lack of raw materials and especially of fuel, one after another had been obliged to close down. A passenger train ran daily between Petrograd and Moscow and a few goods trains, but owing to lack of fuel, it was stated that this service would be further curtailed. As regards food conditions, the situation was getting worse day by day, and in Petrograd, the majority of persons living on a half a pound of oats a day. The Red Guards were better off as they could still obtain small quantities of tea, sugar, and bread, but even for the highest prices, other people could not get food. Transport difficulties increased day by day as there were hardly any horses left in the Petrograd, and innumerable formalities had to be gone through before a parcel could be taken from a shop or a store. All transport without permit was prohibited. The food question dominates all the others. Signed, Kilmarnock.